Hi guys, it's Leah. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new, and welcome to a list of my all-time favourite books. I realised that I have never done a definitive list of like my favourite books of all time, my 6-star reads, my god tier books, and considering it's my birthday this week, I thought now would be the perfect time. I have so many books that I absolutely adore with everything in me, books that have absolutely shaped who I am as a person, books that I still think about every single day, even if I read them over 3 years ago. However, on the other side of that, I am a very picky 5-star reader. For me to say that a book is my favourite book, I mean it is my favourite book. I absolutely need to think that a book is perfect for it to reach that title. So I do have a ton of other books that I would say are god tier books or 6-star books. I kind of want to do a video separate to that. So for today, we're going to go through 10 of my all-time favourite reads and ones that I think you absolutely should pick up. We'll keep my favourite book of all time obviously for last, but other than that, it is going to be in no particular order. So first and foremost, All's Well by Mona Awad. I adore Mona Awad so much. She is the author obviously of the infamous Bunny and also Rouge, which was really popular last year, and I absolutely adore all of her books, but this one is definitely my number one. In this, we are essentially following a theatre professor who really wants to put on the play All's Well That Ends Well. However, her class wants to put on Macbeth. We are very much following her inner and outer turmoil. She also suffers with a chronic illness after a really terrible accident, and as a chronic illness girl myself, this book made me feel so seen in a way that no one really had before, and in a way that a book never really had before, and I appreciated it for that on a whole nother level. But simultaneously, apart from that, this book in general is just so phenomenal. I mean, if you've read anything by Mona Awad before, you will know how evocative and how whimsical and strange her writing is, and this was no different. We are very much following a protagonist who is extremely controversial and is quite unreliable actually, and I love unreliable narrators, which is also partly why I no doubt enjoyed this so much. I definitely do want to preface that with the chronic illness representation, it is so real and so raw, and due to that can be quite heavy and can be quite hard to read. I definitely struggled sometimes with that. So if you are also somebody with a chronic illness and you suffer from chronic pain, it does go very in depth, but I would say the representation was phenomenal. It was just quite hard to read at times. However, this book was just so amazing. I read it like 2 years ago for the first time, and I still think about it every single day. This is also definitely the book with the most annotations and tabs I think I've ever done. Cannot recommend this one enough. I feel like I'm gonna obviously say that for every single one of these books, so I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but if you haven't read All's Well and you've read other Mona Awad books, or even if you haven't, this one is just the best in my opinion and my absolute favourite. I love Mona Awad so much. Then we will go for The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. Yoko Ogawa is another author who I really actually do need to read more from. I've now read 2 books from her, this one still being my favourite. This is one of the most unique books I have ever read in my entire life. It is a dystopian read, and I love dystopians. I always just think when it comes to dystopian reads, there are endless possibilities in social commentary and commentary on the natural world that just absolutely flourish in every single one. This one specifically, however, we are set on an island where things just essentially go missing. Words can go missing, objects can go missing, anything can really go missing. For the most part, the residents of this island cannot remember these things that go missing. However, some people do, and if you do, the memory police will be after you. Nobody knows what the memory police do with all of these people and all of these residents. They just vanish and are never seen again, and it is just such a beautiful read on humanity, on human connection, on why we place the meaning on the things that we do, how imperative it is sometimes to focus on things like the natural world or building real meaningful connections with the people around us as opposed to focusing on things like technology. The way that Yoko Ogawa also discusses writing and becoming a novelist and just books in general and the importance of those, alongside the fact that her writing is just astonishing anyway, was superb and is still a book that I absolutely carry with me all of the time. Again, I think about all of these, to be honest, every single day. I think about them all of the time, but this one was so atmospheric. I want to say that I read it 2-3 years ago, and I can still so clearly and vividly picture all of the scenes and so much of this book. I just adored it so much, would highly recommend. Next, let's go on to the only sort of poetry slash arguably non-fiction that we have on the list, Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. If you have never read a Rilke before, you are the luckiest person on earth. Rilke was an incredible poet. He is undoubtedly my favourite poet. He has been my favourite poet for years at this point, and I still haven't read everything that he's ever written. Letters to a Young Poet was also the first book that I ever read from him. This actually profoundly, and I say that proudly, changed my life. I feel like when it comes to literature, there are so many different things that you gain from it. Many times they do feel like they change your life, but I can say with absolute certainty, this is the book that did it for me. This tiny, superb superb little book essentially details letters between Rainer Maria Rilke and this young officer cadet. These letters hyperfixate on things like writing, despair, love, sex, grief. The amount of conversation in this was absolutely breathtaking. Like I said, it is technically non-fiction, but it very much reads like poetry. There were an ungodly amount of quotes in this that, like I said, changed my life. Now that I've also read a couple more Rilke collections, I just think the way that he discusses art and specifically writing is phenomenal, especially if you are a writer. He will either absolutely make you fall in love with writing or he will make you never want to write again. It was just so astounding. I think about this all of the time. I'm gonna read you my favorite quote from this entire collection because when I read it, it was literally kind of what I lived my life by. I read it when I want to say I was 20 for the first time. I was at university. I remember it was actually the second lockdown and it just actually like it shifted everything for me. So the quote reads, "We have no reason to be mistrustful of our world, for it is not against us. If it holds terrors, they are our terrors. If it has its abysses, these abysses belong to us. If there are dangers, then we must try to love them." Superb, give me 10 more of them. Okay, the next two I'm gonna do in unison. Once you see what they are, it's gonna make so much sense. We have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. If you're not new here, it is no secret how much I adore the Brontes, and simultaneously, like Letters to a Young Poet, Jane Eyre, again, changed my life. I have adored the Brontes entirely ever since I was a teenager. Jane Eyre was actually the classic book that really got me back into reading, and I owe it so much for that. I studied not only Jane Eyre, but I studied the entirety of the Bronte sisters. Honestly, I will say justice for my girl Anne Bronte. The only novel I've ever read from her was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I loved it so much, but it definitely didn't live up to these two in my opinion. But every opportunity I had to study the Brontes throughout school, I absolutely did. I did so many essays on Jane Eyre, and then I went to university to study English Lit and creative writing. I do absolutely owe that to Jane Eyre and to the Brontes because of my sole infatuation for it and for Gothic classics. It made me want to go to uni and study it. I did also do my dissertation on the Brontes. I've actually had so many questions about my dissertation over the past few years. I did do it, for anyone wondering. I did it on the female Gothic and the Brontes, and I absolutely loved it. I wish I could go back and rewrite it. I just loved doing it so much. I love studying them. I love reading them. But Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights are undoubtedly always going to be some of my all-time favourite books, not only solely because of the nostalgia, especially of Jane Eyre, but in terms of the context and the history of the Brontes and just how astonishing their atmosphere and their writing was. I just love it so much. Another book that of course I love so much is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I remember so vividly reading this book, finishing this book. It feels like it was all, especially my TikTok content, was spaced around. I adored this story so much. There was so much that I absolutely just fell in love with. I love the characters in these. Well, don't get me wrong, I love the way the characters were written. I love the character analysis. Are the characters so pretentious even though it is a commentary? Yeah. However, that paired with the story and the setting and the atmosphere and the dark academia occult vibes were just perfect to me. This is still the only Donna Tartt book I have ever read. The Goldfinch is on my 25 for 2025 TBR. I am getting to the Goldfinch this year if it is literally the last thing that I do. I'm so intrigued to see how her writing in a different novel holds up for me in comparison to this. I just again think about this all of the time. It is one of the most iconic stories I think ever written. I think it has one of the most iconic first lines ever written. Also one of the most iconic endings ever written. I think about this every single day. I desperately want to do a reread. Maybe I'll do a reread in the autumn because it is absolutely a book to read around that season. It was just so breathtaking. It has so much societal commentary and context, especially to do with academia. I just thought it was brilliant and it is popular for a reason in my opinion. I just adored it. Next we'll go on to another dystopian book that I loved. I feel like this again will come as absolutely no surprise to anyone, especially if you follow me over on TikTok. I am always raving about this book. I am always talking about this book. I remember reading it for the first time and having heard nobody talk about it. It is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, of course. This book is my entire heart and soul. Before I get into why I loved it so much, I'm going to give you the origins of this book and the context of how I even started it and how I found it. It was when I was a bookseller and I essentially won this giveaway from Penguin of a tote bag full of translated fiction. I've always been a huge translated fiction lover and reader. I love it so much. It is one of my favourite subgenres of books. There were such incredible books in that tote bag. I remember so vividly literally opening up the package with my colleagues on the till, whipping this book out and being like, that cover? I need to read it right now. And so I literally did. I went home and I think about 2 days later, I started it. I read it nearly in its entirety in just a few days. I obviously fell utterly in love with it, and then I never stopped posting about it on TikTok. I literally feel so lucky that I went into this with no expectations, having heard nobody ever talk about it before, and thus just going into it so blind and being so beautifully surprised. This book was everything to me for so many different reasons. In it, we are essentially following 40 women who are trapped underground in a bunker. They don't know how they got there, they don't know why they are there, and then one day they can leave. And it is just such a desolate story about this kind of strange dystopian world. As a reader, you're absolutely trying to navigate where they are and what is happening to them and what their future holds. It is such a beautiful story on friendship and womanhood, what it means to be a woman when all of your female identity has been stripped from you, but simultaneously what it means to be human when all of your humanity has been stripped from you. It's one that I do genuinely think every single person should read, and every single person will likely get something different from it. It is so imperative, has really imperative discussion, just absolutely flawless. The last paragraph of this book is embedded into my brain, like write it on my tombstone. I literally can never get it out. I think about it every single waking second. And the last scene specifically, like actually sick and twisted, it breaks my heart. It was so evocative and so eloquent and so unique, and I highly recommend this to everyone. Like I said, one of my favorites, obviously that's why we're here. We are now on to the last three. I'm gonna go on to this one and then we'll do these two in unison. Next one is, of course, again, it will not be a surprise to any of you, It Lasts Forever and Then It Is Over by Anne DeMarkin. This was my favorite book of 2024, and I swear literally I was about 20 pages in, and I remember I posted on my Instagram story something like, this is gonna become a favorite book of all time or a 5-star, and oh my god, I was not wrong. It literally took me only about 20 pages for it to become an all-time favorite read, and I literally just like I Who Have Never Known Men, I went into this knowing nothing, having never heard anybody talk about it. The only reason that I picked it up was because I saw it when I was working in the bookshop, and the title, I was like, that is the most gorgeous title I've ever had. And simultaneously, I really love Fitzcarraldo editions. I want to read so much more of their backlist. Since finishing this, I definitely have, and I was so intrigued. Another one that I literally went home that night and started. And it is another dystopian, but this one is so incredibly unique. We are essentially following a girl in the afterlife. However, she cannot remember her name, she cannot remember her life prior, cannot remember how she died, she cannot remember anything other than she loved this one thing. Initially, we don't know if this one thing is an object or a person, we just know that she loved them, and this book details her innate love and her innate desire for this thing, and how literally post-death it's all she can remember. Even down to the narrative and the structure of this book, it is so unique. It's definitely a read that is slightly ambiguous, but the number one thing to say about this book, as well as the plot just being absolutely phenomenal and so superb, was the writing style. Anne DeMarkin actually included some of the best writing I've ever read in my entire life, and I've read like over 600 books now, so that, whenever I say, is such a bold statement. It was so haunting and eloquent and so inventive, and is another one that is very philosophical. A lot of my books definitely touch on philosophy and discussions surrounding grief and life and loving and how to live to the fullest. Don't get me wrong, this one was so full of despair and so full of grief, but simultaneously was so full of small joys, and just the gentleness of this novel was phenomenal. I'm never gonna stop talking about it. If you haven't read it yet, please do. I know that it was actually sold out for a while, and now I think it is back in stock, so please get your hands on it if you haven't already. Finally, we're on to the last two books. This is, again, absolutely not gonna come as a surprise to anyone if you're not new here. I always talk about this author. She is my number one favorite author of all time, and actually this book, which is really bold to say, I haven't even finished this yet, and that is The Complete Stories of Clarice Lispector. The fact that I haven't even finished this yet, and it's literally on my favorite books of all time list, is crazy to me. I'm currently 496 pages in. I literally have about 120 pages left. I have been reading this since January 2024. Clarice Lispector is somebody who I talk about all of the time, and somebody who I will literally try and convince you to read this. I've tried to convince every single person in my life to start one of her books, and I will say that I very frequently get questions as to where I think personally is the best place to start with her work. However, I haven't read everything she's ever written, and I'm reading them in chronological order. So I think I've only read about 5 of her novels in chronological order. And alongside that, for over a year, I've been reading her complete stories. This is the collection of every short story that she ever wrote, and I've been reading it in and out of every other book that I'm currently going through, and it's been the most joyful and intimate and also quite soul-destroying experience that I think I've ever had with reading. This collection is so superb, and I genuinely think that this would be a perfect place to start with her, despite the fact that, don't be intimidated by the size, there are stories in this that are literally literally like 2 pages long, but you do get to see every single narrative style and choice that she has and that she makes. There are so many different kinds of stories in this, and I've just loved reading it over the past year so much that I instantly know it's instantly a favorite. I just adore it. So I would highly recommend her complete stories anyway. But my favorite book of all time, my number one read, like if anyone was ever to come up to me in the street and be like, babe, what is your number one book of all time, it would have to be Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. Another one that I literally have and will continue to recommend till my dying breath. I just love this book so much. This is such a beautiful and quiet and intimate story following the protagonist Joanna. She's experienced her fair share of grief as a girl, and we are just following her become a young woman and navigating her 20s in all of its joys and its heartache and its despair, and deeply to her core she just wants to love and she wants to be loved and she wants to live. One thing that I find so specific to Clarice Lispector is her way of capturing womanhood and simultaneously capturing the innate desire just to live. I feel like it sounds so simple, but her writing is so unique and is so raw. Every time I read a piece of her writing, I can just tell that she poured her entire being into it, and I don't always feel like that with writing. Her voice is just so unique, and I relate to so much of her writing on such a personal level than I have done with any other author, which definitely helps her case. But alongside that, bottom line, her writing is just absolutely phenomenal, and I really do think that you would read anything from Clarice Lispector and you can instantly recognize her talent. I adore how philosophical she gets in this book and simultaneously all of her other works in a way that isn't necessarily a lot about God and about religion. She does very often have very complex and layered views to things like that, which I think is also so incredibly real. And the way that she also just talks about the I and defining yourself and how to find yourself, especially as a young woman. I always say that this book is definitely perfect to read in your early 20s as a young woman, but simultaneously anybody read it. Like anybody can get absolutely everything from this book, no matter who you are, no matter your age. I'm convinced that everybody would be able to spot the beauty and relate to something in all of Clarice's works, but especially this. As I said, in Near to the Wild Heart specifically, the way that she just talks about grief and defining yourself as a young woman and finding yourself, the lengths that sometimes people and you will go to in order to love, and especially to be loved in return and also to be remembered. It is so heartfelt, it is so destroying, and it is so full of despair, but in such a beautiful way, and it is also so full of so much joy. Reading this book for the first time was just such a pivotal point in my early 20s that I'm never ever gonna forget, and I'm always gonna be so incredibly grateful for. And yeah, I just love Clarice Lispector in anything. Like, read any of her books, please. Near to the Wild Heart, out of all of the ones that I've read so far, is definitely my favourite and is my favourite book of all time as it currently stands. So those were 10 of my favourite books of all time. If you have read any of them, please let me know what you thought about them. Obviously, definitely if you love them. Also, if you didn't, I would love to hear all of your thoughts. If any of them are on your TBR, if you've read any other books from these authors that I said I haven't, please let me know, because I definitely want to read every single backlist from all of these authors that exist. Simultaneously, please let me know what your favorite book of all time is, or if you don't really count favorites and you just have a book that you love so dearly, please let me know what it is. I feel like this is always such a great way to get such good recommendations. Or comment a red emoji for Near to the Wild Heart. As always too, if you did enjoy this video and you are not yet subscribed, I would absolutely love to have you here. Thank you so much for watching now and always. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon with another video.